All right, so good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me well. Yes? All right. We have a few people on the line, right?
Yeah, and we have interpretation.
Okay, all right. So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Claudia Amaral. I am the head of office for DG ECO here in Ukraine. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you to this workshop today, to the roundtable, and to say a few opening remarks. So it's really a pleasure to see all of the colleagues around the table, and thank you very much for PIN for the organization of the roundtable and all the participants, and thank you very much for the presence also of the ministry. Thank you, Deputy Minister, for being here with us today, and all the rest of the colleagues. So, as most of you might be aware, since 2014, that DG ECO has been prioritizing interventions in the wash sector, always aiming at helping to restore access to water and sanitation for millions of people affected by the conflict. Of course, this has increased since February 2022. And we continue to work and to be engaged on with our partners, working closely also with water supply companies and through the distribution of hygiene kits to the affected population. So obviously, the devastating impact on the water supply and sanitation and hygiene post-February, took its toll on what was already a precarious, infrastructure in many circumstances. And it is very good to see that we are still able to provide some support to better the situation of the people impacted. This mobilization of support in an insecure environment, local water supply companies and the government showing high level of resilience and the dedication to maintain and restore the water supply and the functioning of the system. Of course, it's a hardest work engaging a lot of people, but we all happy around the table to play our share in that. The Kakhovka Dam explosion that also showed some of the new challenges for many communities that bore the impact on the water and sanitation, as well on the livelihoods of millions of them. So I think in many ways it is important to emphasize also the complementarities between the humanitarian and development actors, actors such as EIB, EBRD, government and local support, bilateral cooperation, to continue to work on a response that builds on these complementarities. Since the scale of the need is huge and, it's not one single actor or only humanitarians that are able to provide the full response or deal with all the systemic repairs. So once again, thank you very much to all the humanitarian partners, the local water supply companies that manage to maintain and restore the critical functioning of the systems, but more complex and sustainable long-term solutions are important to discuss. So as humanitarians, obviously, we're very happy to continue to provide our support, but it's, as I was saying before, very important that we bring all the efforts together and look for synergies and complementarities to make sure that we're doing the adequate assistance and support for the sector. So I look forward to participate in the discussions and to see very much a lot of the interventions throughout today. So thank you very much to all of you for coming today. Thanks. And I think now is handing over to the ministry, right?
Дякую за представлення.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the Office of the European Union, European Commission, for the opportunity for all of us to gather here today at the round table to discuss this extremely important topic for all of us. It is the problematics of water for people, water for state, water for all of us, since it is one of the key issues and even more attention to this issue. We as a government should spend after the full-scale Russian invasion, which started in February 2022. Those crimes that were committed by the aggressor led to the fact that Kakhovka dam was ruined. Practically, the explosion took place at Kakhovka HPP, and it led to extremely negative circumstances for all life species in that territory, but also for energy system and for providing general maintaining livelihood for that region. The government sent all possible resources almost immediately to have water supply opportunities for the community. It was first priority task that was set based on the result of the meeting of the staff with the president. We had to provide the region with drinking water, and the implementation of large scale, one of the biggest probably in the story of all independent Ukraine project on building water pipeline started in Dnipro region, because it will provide water to Kryvoruchkina and also such cities as in Dnipro and Zaporizhia regions, which are very close to the bank of Kakhovka HPP, Marhanets, Nikopol, and Pokrov. The Ministry of Infrastructure, together with the Agency of Reconstruction, we are moving together, by the way, with Mr. Mykhailo, as the newly appointed head of water agency. We are implementing these issues, and almost every day we have some problematic things that have to be solved immediately, because such processes are not easy. They have to be well thought, well judged, and lion's share of our time we have to spend on making right decisions, and that this balance of water that exists does not create a credit in other regions and does not create disaster in other cities. That's why we need to have well thought decisions together with our partners, and it has to lead to the fact that we will pay particular attention to water balance and water supply of the country. Water balance is right now not profitable, and it is not enough for us to live calmly. And here I would like to mention and to remind you about the story of the development of water supply of drinking water in Israel, because from the very first day of their existence, they had huge problem, and it was to create the state on the territory where there was huge scarcity of water supply. This country has shown probably one of the best results so far, because they managed not only to supply themselves with the debit of drinking water, but even develop agriculture and supply this water to their neighbors. And it is great technologies, advanced technologies and resources, and first and foremost, it's understanding of the nation, understanding of people, that without sustainable water supply, there will be no life on that territories. Right now, currently we hear a lot, and actually recently I have started working in this direction again. And I would like to say that before that, I was working in the Ministry of Finances, and I was working with the water supply and drinking water in particular. Also, I'm a member of a supervisory board of Ukrhydroenergo, so that's why water issue is very dear to me, because energy is a positive thinking, and that's the first thing I have heard when I came to Ukrhydroenergo. They told me that you will see, as soon as you start working with water, water creates all opportunities for the development. It creates positive thinking, it creates positive emotions, and water is movement, movement to life. Getting back to our to the problems, I would like to emphasize, to highlight that very often while dealing with water issues, we have to face with preparation of documents. Water supply system is not only a Ministry of Infrastructure issue today, it's a national issue. And here, local authorities, central authorities, and Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Environment, State Agency of Water, and some industry also that create different contemporary technologies for water supply. They all have to work together because water is also energy saving. And one of the biggest needs water supply stations, they consume the biggest amount of energy, and we have to look at that direction to somehow decrease this indicator and decrease that indicator of consumption of energy, say of energy. It's timing, that's all. I do not have time to speak anymore.
It's not for us.
Ні, це таке буває. Це просто хтось зайшов туди, куди треба.
Нормально. Це нагадує, що час.
It just reminds me that probably it's time for me to give the floor to the other speaker. So, but what I wanted to say that it's a question of cooperation, of understanding the processes, and we also have to kind of leave our statement that we still have had from Soviet times behind, that huge consumption and huge consumption circle of people are interested in this issue, and it doesn't matter the quality, the quantity is important. But I would like to say that quality and quantity both important. But it's also important where do we get this water, because to take water from artisan sources right now, artisan springs, and to take away those resources that we have, probably it is not very right decision, since we have rivers and developed a system of water channels that also we have to work on that as well. So the main thesis, the main statement for me today, that we have to change mentally, we have to change the understanding of how do we need to treat water, and it is huge propaganda among the population, propaganda in the good sense of this word, because the population, they do not want to pay for water today. We understand that income level of population is pretty critical, it's negative, and war, of course, put its toll on that, but we have to work because the foundation of life is water. We can't live, we can live without lots of things, but we cannot live without water, especially without clean water. Clean water, that nation for future, and its understanding of the development and investment and any other kind of activity. So that's why all those issues that were accumulated probably from the very first days of independence of Ukraine, that constant speculation on tariffs, on water supply, drainage, heat supply. So it was the position of for many years, for many politicians, that we shouldn't raise tariffs, we shouldn't manage them. And frankly speaking, there were some systems created which were absolutely closed in itself. Water management tried to survive as they could, so they were taking money for investments, but they directed them for paying salaries, and it led to the decrease of water supply quality. They have more debts for energy, for paying for services. I will ask 3 more minutes for you to take a look at the presentation of the consequences, but the problem was there was a difference in tariffs because the state had to pay for this tariffs. But I would like to mention that since we have this unjustified tariffs, and since this provision of service is not an investment component, we do not get proper financing in this branch, we will not be able to direct resources, and we have experience of that. Unfortunately, it's difficult in many aspects. and it's different, and it's development of world infrastructure with the help of the World Bank, and it led to it helped us to direct certain funds to enterprises of water supply somewhere in the middle of 2000s. Some enterprises still haven't paid their loans, even though they were on pretty profitable, beneficial conditions, but still they didn't find a political will at that time to accept tariffs with proper investment components. And actually it led to the fact that they couldn't pay off their loans. And right now we have problem here because Ministry of Finances just does not want to involve any new loans with the support of the state because there are still long debts that exist and historical memory accumulates. And so somebody raises this issue, but we have the opportunity to engage resources for the development of infrastructure, of water supply and drainage, but unfortunately, let's say, old cases do not let us do that in a proper way.
Більше 10 років ми займаємося проектом.
It's been more than 10 years that we've been implementing the project to develop the Bortnichi aeration station with support from the Japanese Agency for International Development, from JICA. $1 billion was allocated in 2015. Relevant documents were signed, but currently we must state that the project has never gone into proper implementation. These are also aspects that prevent us from being able to access funding, because projects like these turn into a source of risks for the creditors. They are not implemented, the goals are not achieved, time is and human resources are essentially wasted, which effectively results in the system remaining in the same condition, deteriorating further due to nothing being done, and the quality of the service does not improve. I'm not going to take away more time. I think the issues are pretty clear. The situation is that jointly we need to keep working, and I'm incredibly grateful for the fact that we have this opportunity to exchange opinions on how the issue can be addressed. From our side, this is about shaping policy and implementing it when it comes to sanitation, when it comes to water provision, both in rural and urban areas. And we're working hard also under the new legislation, and we're very open to hearing ideas, new ideas, because without new ideas, without modern technology, we will be falling behind even more than we are right now. So we need serious decisions. We need to make serious moves right now, also creative solutions and decisions, because this is a piece of difficult systematic work that cannot be done quickly, and we've already unfortunately wasted a bit of time. If we could have my presentation on screen right now, this is just to get you up to speed. My colleagues put this presentation together, speaking about some of the consequences of the war for the water supply section. Since the presentation is in Ukrainian, I'm going to take a while to comment. So when it comes to centralized water supply and sewage, over 2,000 water generation facilities and stations, meaning out of what exists in the Ukraine. The general characteristic is that we have 2,000 of these stations preparing water, some 9,000 pumping stations, some 1,500 kilometers of pipelines, 1,000 sewage treatment stations, 300 pumping stations for sewage, 40,000 individual networks of sewage. So in terms of these numbers, you can see that it's a very well-developed and ramified system, but it's accumulated a good amount of amortization. In terms of consumption of electricity, we're talking about 3 billion of kilowatt hours a year, 2.1 kilowatt hour per cubic meter of water supplied. Electricity that is consumed, that is electricity consumed for water supply and sewage. 62% of the population in Ukraine have access to centralized waters, 42% to centralized sewage, and 2.5% have access to sewage in rural areas. So essentially 70% of Ukraine's population have access to centralized water supply systems. And about 30% still use individual access points such as wells and others. 38.3% of water supply networks, 35% of sewage systems, and 25.6% of all pumping equipment is at risk of failure. This paints the picture of how much investment is necessary to address equipment in dangerous conditions. I'm not even mentioning further developing the system and investing into it. So about a third of all equipment is at the limit of its operating capacity and might soon break down. So we're looking at very significant investment necessary. We're also looking at significant debt when it comes to our consumers. We're looking at something at 8.5 billion Ukrainian hryvnia. That is the debt of consumers. 7.9 billion Ukrainian hryvnia is how much water supply companies owe for their electricity bills. So this is an issue not just of the consumers themselves. This is about companies not being paid for the services that they provide, and in turn not being able to pay for what they consume. Let's talk about war-related damages now. So this is pretty much in line with RDNA 2. The direct losses to water supply infrastructure is $2.2 billion US. In terms of strictly direct losses to infrastructure, and the overall losses in the sector of water supply and sewage is $7.5 billion US. The anticipated need for recovery is just over $7 billion US. This is an issue that can be discussed because, as I mentioned, when we discuss recovery, there's the position of the cabinet of ministers and the prime minister is that we need to build back better. So this relates to ensuring the energy efficiency of these solutions, the use of contemporary structures and contemporary projects. I'm not going to dwell too much on the government's actions. I've mentioned them already. Some decisions are highlighted here, which are still pinpoint in nature. I think they still lack a strategic vision, except for what relates to the construction of water supply networks in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. So money is being allocated from the recovery fund to deliver potable water, to drill wells, to purify certain sources, to strengthen hydrotechnical structures, to ensure our population with potable water, specifically in those regions that are currently under continuous attacks from the aggressor state, the Russian Federation. I want to use this opportunity to thank all of our partners, not just the European Investment Bank, GIZ, the World Bank, Unisef, but also the broader circle of all stakeholders paying attention to these issues, looking into solutions and supporting us with their expertise and their competence in terms of developing further steps. All projects that have to do with achieving humanitarian stability and developing our water supply system. Thank you for your attention. Sorry for taking more time than was allocated to me, but I really wanted to make sure that this is a comprehensive report. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vasil. If you don't mind, just a couple of quick comments in simple words. What would be your suggestions for improving the cooperation, the communication with partners, donors in this sector in the future? Look, what I can tell you is the cooperation is already quite fruitful, and with the key players, we are in continuous conversation with representatives of the World Bank when it comes to assessing the losses. I mentioned the RDNA before, so we're talking with them, and we're also talking about development support. When it comes to cooperation with partners, such as organizations that work in this sector, meaning humanitarian functions, also grant funding, that is where it is provided. I would suggest perhaps also reaching out to associations and financial institutions. We can have very fruitful discussions, and always feel free to reach out directly. The ministry is considers all addresses expeditiously, and we're always open to communication.
So if we don't have other questions, we don't have Deputy Minister of Ministry of Ecology, unfortunately. That's why next word goes to the state agency. Я вибачаюсь.
Oh, terribly sorry. We do have a representative. Yes, hello, hello. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. The Ministry of Environment here. My name is Viktor Zhuk. I am head of the Office for Nature Protection and Water Resource Conservation. I want to first of all turn your attention to the impact that that has taken us to the situation that we're observing now. We're looking at a worsening of the situation with our water resources, significant pollution, and well, obviously, the first factor is organic pollutants that end up in water bodies as a result of the inefficient operation of purification structures. The experts of our relevant service continuously calculate the damages dealt to water resources, and we're looking at almost 82 billion Ukrainian hryvnia. Also, monitoring laboratories of the water service are monitoring in operative regimes where such pollution takes place. They take the necessary samples and measurements, and according to the monitoring in the occupied territories and territories that have been affected by combat action, we are registering the increase in organic and biogenic pollution. We are registering two large indicators of magnesium, zinc, high contents of petroleum products, as well as other harmful substances in the water. We also fixate violations where previously, before the war, we never saw excessive pollution. We have witnessed this with the largest rivers of Ukraine, the river basin, the Desna, the Siversky Donets, and this has to do mostly with attacks on critical infrastructure, sites of energy supply, water supply, sewage, water treatment facilities, etc. So due to the fact that these infrastructure sites have ceased their operation, unfortunately, sewage ends up directly in water bodies, which contributes to pollution, of course. So we consider this is a critical situation. It is critically important that water supply and treatment infrastructure is restored. The Ministry of Environment, when it comes to its responsibilities, provides for the relevant monitoring, the situational analysis of the condition of the water bodies. And I wanted to use this opportunity to thank you for the invitation. I'll be very happy to contribute to the conversation overall. Thank you. If you don't mind, does the Ministry of Environment run any sort of programs together with international donors, partners? Are you receiving any sort of support? Yes, the Ministry of Environment is in active cooperation with international programs. We saw the involvement of organizations such as, for example, the OSCE, in assessing the impact of the military aggression on the environment. We have also seen the involvement of donor programs such as EU for Environment, Water and Data. This program is supporting us in developing the plan for managing river basins, as well as other planned measures that relate to restoring water resources. There appears to be a moment of silence as the microphone is not switched on. Yes, hello, colleagues. Greetings. Thank you so much to the EU delegation for enabling us to participate in this incredibly important discussion today. Yes, indeed, the issue of water quality, water provision and sewage was very much on the agenda for Ukraine before the full-scale invasion and the war. We have lots of communities with asbestos networks, and lots of communities that do not have centralized water supply at all. So this was a relevant issue. Before the war, we were looking into directing funding to addressing these issues through, for example, the environmental funds at community levels, but we didn't reach the point where the relevant cabinet of ministers resolution would be passed. Currently, we're looking that on paper, of course, environmental funding is there, but in fact, it isn't there. The problem existed before, but now it has become catastrophic after the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. I am mentioning this not based on expert judgments. Kryvyi Rih is actually my hometown and my constituency. So since the very first days of the Kakhovka tragedy, I have a good understanding of what happened at personal levels in the Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, and Kherson oblasts. In Kryvyi Rih district, 1 million of people were left without water supply. This was a catastrophe. And I want to use this opportunity to thank the government for how quickly money was allocated, how quickly these experimental water supply lines were built. They addressed the issue in part, and I want to mention that from our end, we're trying to involve international donors. For example, thanks to a UNDP project, Kryvyi Rih district received 21 mobile water purification stations. But let's be honest, these measures are not strategic. They are addressing the immediate issue and simply sort of a stopgap solution. We are expecting another shipment of these mobile stations now, but we need to have a more global approach. Ukraine is making strategic steps, trying to address this issue systematically. We have a law on potable water and drinking water provision, which was approved in December 2022, a water strategy for Ukraine, but this is insufficient. I want to provide a couple of examples. I am here to present something that we've developed together with Yuri Koryavchenko and our expert team, an idea for a project, a proposal for establishing the office of an ombudsman for drinking water. It was rightfully pointed out that the issue of potable water is a national issue. It is multifaceted, and it requires the involvement of government entities, non-government entities. I want to stress, and I can support this with examples, it requires the involvement of the research and scientific communities. And this office of a water ombudsman might act as mediator, coordinator. And look, there's the first level, all issues that relate to the quality of the water resources, the quality of the potable water and the condition of the water resources in Ukraine. Then there's the second level of water supply and sewage. This relates to infrastructure, which is why, together with Yuri Koryavchenko, representing the Committee for Transport Infrastructure at the Parliament of Ukraine, we're ready to oversee the activities of this ombudsman's office. And as an example, supporting the need for an office, I'm going to share this case. So this terrible catastrophe took place. We were on our way to the General Assembly of Impel, where Ukraine was first accepted this year. And on our way, we started drafting an address to the Cabinet of Ministers mentioning that we need to establish an interagency commission to align our positions. I understand how difficult were the conditions for the Ministry of Infrastructure at the time, how quickly they needed to make decisions on construction, etc. But we could eradicate and prevent quite a number of mistakes. Another case, Kryvyi Rih annually sees something like 30 to 50 million cubic meters of mine water with very high mineralization. It is first accumulated in an artificial pond, and then it is dropped into the Ingulets River. And previously, we were able, even though this was not a productive solution, but no, there was no other option, we were able to at least purify it with water, to dilute the salts, and then so that in spring, this program started. But now we're in a critical situation. We will have a deficit of water, and if this amount of salt mine water will be dropped into the river, I mean, look, previously this would show up in the fields in Kherson, in the Mykolaiv Oblast. So we need these issues to be aligned. What do you do with mine water so that it's correlated with the construction of the water supply network? This is one of the examples where we could achieve synergy. We could find solutions that would address issues systematically. Currently, as we develop the concept for the Ombudsman's office, we are looking into specific measures. We're closely working with the environmental inspection. At the beginning of the war, we established an operative HQ for coordination. We involved experts to develop methodologies for calculating losses, and we're working closely with the environmental inspection. We are seeing lots of negative, unfortunate examples which are registered, and our task is not just to register them, but also address them.
Є такі проблеми у сфері водопостачання,
To systematize it, we have such problems in water supply system and providing quality drinking water for the population of Ukraine. It's absent of monitoring and control on the current condition of water resources. And here we are talking not only about the regulation of the Cabinet of Minister 103 that prohibits any type of planned and extraordinary assessment, because it can be still done through the ministry, but it is in the subjectivity of regional councils and communities that are not interested sometimes in proper reaction when people address such issues. So that's why this is lagging behind. I would like to frankly highlight that regional state authorities, usually without special control from the central apparatus, are not that interested as well. And Cabinet of Ministers and other institutions, they are more occupied with war issues and more global problems for us right now. We also see that there is certain doubling of functions and responsibilities. Very often it is the reason to avoid administrative responsibility. And in this case, the Office of Water Ombudsman will be this coordinational platform, will be working not only as a coordinator, but also as a moderator of certain events, measures, and solutions. But I would like to highlight that apart from practical tasks, it is extremely important for us also to implement European legislation, EU acquis. So we have to work on that. Of course, we can say proudly that based on the European Commission in February concerning environmental reforms, it was 1 and now it's already 2, but still it's not enough and we need help in the implementation. And the help in implementation of such EU acquis is needed for us as quality water, the managing of risk of flooding, the protection of seas and oceans. So the scale, the fact that we need to integrate into the Ukrainian legislation principles, ecological principles of the EU, it is of crucial importance for us. And I would like to highlight not only the relevance of creating the Office of Water Ombudsman as to address everyone here and to ask whether you are interested in supporting this office methodologically, expertly, financially. We are ready jointly work on the concept. We are ready to agree this roadmap with donors. We really strive for it to be an effective, efficient body that will be able to solve lots of issues and coordinate different organizations. We can offer to create this office either through the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, or if we are talking about legal foundations of its creation, it can be created through the decree of the President of Ukraine as a non-governmental body, and financing will be provided by donors. Organizational structure also can be discussed, but Generally, we thought that it will be the head of the body, the ombudsman of drinking water, the deputy head that will be dealing with research, control, administrative work, and different units. And the most important thing, there should be a supervisory board of the Office of Ombudsman, and it will consist of representative of donors' organizations. So the donors can clearly see how fast key indicators of effectiveness are achieved. And of course, to the supervisory board, we need to engage community because they also need to have the opportunity to track our activity and to monitor it. The rough plans of implementation and stages, we have it. I do not want to overload you with this abundance of information, but I sincerely hope for constructive cooperation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you for your speech. I immediately would like to say that on behalf of Ukrainian Water Association, we are ready to work with you on any kind of initiatives concerning ombudsman, and the community will definitely support you as well.
Так, будь ласка, Інна Вінничук, Unisef
Yes,
представляє.
of course. Inna Yanchuk, Unisef. I'm working with hygiene and sanitation in Kyiv, national office in Kyiv, Ukraine. Olena, thank you for such initiative. Really, for the last year, while working in the sphere of WASH, we felt that we lack such bodies. For example, ombudsman. We were looking for such variants as water ministry, but we have already a unit in the Ministry of Recovery, and we will be very interested in helping you to create this office. And we can help you with both experts and different modalities, creating documents. So actually, I will be very happy to exchange contacts and support this initiative. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Thank you, Olena, for such extremely interesting statement that you have mentioned. I personally think that what you have said about bringing norms and legislation of Ukraine in compliance to EU acquis is extremely important, and I believe that it will be very relevant, in particular for humanitarian projects and partners working in this sphere, to take it into account, because already now, since we are moving to the integration, to the accession to the EU, we have to use as much as possible those norms and those standards that have been that are used in the European Union. We understand that legislatively it can take a while because there are lots of different aspects, but certain norms, I do believe that we already can start researching them and implementing them in the programs of humanitarian response and other long-term humanitarian programs. Thank you.
No more questions, comments?
Колеги, доброго дня. По-перше, хочу
Well, dear
подякувати.
colleagues, first of all, I would like to express DG ECHO and People in Need and Ukrainian Water Association and express my gratitude for the organization of this roundtable discussion. Of course, that the full-fledged invasion of the Russian Federation to Ukraine led to seizing and destroying of huge part of water management as an infrastructure, to loss of this infrastructure, and also we have pollution there, and that's huge challenges in the sector. It requires specific understanding of the development under current war times and then later, and we also need a strategic vision and planning of roadmaps and certain needed measures to implement our targets and goals that we set before us. I think that you all know, and if you don't know, I would like to mention that 2 months ago, I was appointed as a head of the State Agency of Water Resources, and the first thing I have faced with that, unfortunately, during the whole period of independence of Ukraine, there was not a vision, no strategy was created for the development of this area. It just doesn't exist. This is the first thing that we would like to focus our attention right now. We need to develop some kind of strategic document Then later we can put different programs on top of that. We can develop different measures on to fulfill our targets. As one of the variants during the development of this vision, one of the possible things is to divide the function of implementation of state policy and managing function, because actually water supply is a managing function. And as one of the possible variants, it is creating a separate subject, for example, national company. Now we are working on the concept on reformatting and giving managing functions to it, because right now we have lack of financing, significant lack of financing. We have lack of absence of single project, not transparent pricing, and so on. And if we have the separate subject of management, I think that it will be possible to solve all those problems. Moreover, for the subject, it will be easier to engage funds. And according to the estimation of international experts right now for the modernization of infrastructure, and it's 93% of depreciation, we will need $1.4 billion. It is for the most urgent needs. And of course, it can be help of donors, loans, and state help in particular. Then for this vision, we will be able to put on different programs. We are now simultaneously working on the program of water supply for those territories that were influenced by war actions. It's east, south, east and south mostly. We selected 9 regions that need separate program for their water supply. For sure, we will pay particular attention to the IT development. Our nearest plans that's to transfer all administrative services into digital form. We would like to achieve not only paperless management, it's a minimum task for us. Actually, it should have been already done, but now we are on the stage of fulfilling that, but we want to have the maximum paperless management. So when we provide administrative services, to minimize the effect of a person as much as possible, and to minimize all corruption risks, to introduce accessible digital tools and services, we will develop such software products. We actually have already been working as Yevoda, Yekadaster, and Monitoring. It is all in the plans of our agency for the current year. We have already launched as a pilot Monitoring project, and it will provide information concerning the state of water resources and their quality. We are now testing the system concerning digitalizing the process of management of the laboratories. So we will form different reports about samplings and protocols of measurement. For you to understand the scale, right now we have 4 modern laboratories. 2 of them already have ISO 17025 standard, and 2 of them we plan to give that standard in the first half of this year. Those laboratories for the last year have 3,400 samples of checking quality of water, and I think this information should be available to everyone, and it should be a digitalized process so they can exchange data and have open access. Yevoda, that should be a very comfortable ITE tool for users, and it will simplify receiving different documents and providing reports on water usage. We have been dealing with that as well, and I hope that in the nearest future, maybe in the nearest quarter, we will be able to unify and launch all of it. Apart from that, of course, that adopting of any kind of and making any kind of decisions is impossible without up-to-date information concerning water resources. That's why we want to create Yakadaster resource, and it will provide open register of water objects and access to information about water resources and their usage. In a nutshell, that's all. But I would like to use this opportunity and this roundtable as a platform. We gathered the needs that it seems to me are pretty possible to solve. We divided them into categories. We made it so that we can communicate with donors, so we can have a single document, and I would like to just run through categories. The most urgent needs in water management complex right now are a little bit more than 37 million euros. And it is understandable that we will start with laboratories that I have talked about to have more comprehensive research and to implement new methods of screening. We need to have additional equipment in our laboratories that I have mentioned about. The need is around 3.5 million euros. And additionally, concerning IT equipment and software, I, frankly speaking, do not even want to tell you about the condition of our IT infrastructure of the state agency because it looks very poor. That we need, first of all, we need to create some kind of certain normal server room where we will need to, we will use it for all our program products, and we need help also in implementing Yakadaster, Yevoda, and the general need here is around 800,000 euros. And of course, one of the most important tasks of the state agency and water resources is providing population with drinking water and protection from what quality of the water. That's why we need excavators, cranes, tractors, bulldozers, and other equipment. The general need and the special equipment is more than 13 million of euro. Apart from that, we also have a range of projects that are not that global, but it seems to us that they are plausible and they are pretty important. First of all, that what Vasil Shkurakov was talking about and Olena Kryvoruchkina. Right now, we have a pilot building of water pipelines to provide water to Dnipropetrovsk and other regions. But right now, water comes from Ingulets River. It has to be purified, taking into account that mine waters are dumped there to create needed water supply for people in Dnipropetrovsk and Mykolaiv region. Right now, Kryvyi Rih and Mykolaiv use water from that and also adjacent territory. So it's around 1.5 million of people who use that, who are using this water. We need to also clean that river. It's around 2.5 kilometers. We need around 14 million of euros for such purification works. Right now, we are providing offers for financial and economic justification of this project. Also, important thing is to strengthen banks because of the wind and change of the water direction, almost everywhere we see that we have certain shallow areas there right now, and they are losing lots of agricultural lands. There are lots of shallow lands, and bank is deteriorating, and different populated areas might be flooded. So for this, we need around 900,000 euros. Additionally, during my business trips that I have pretty often right now, we discussed issues as for purification Urilka River in Kharkiv region, because Kharkiv region takes water from this river, and as of now, it is a pretty dangerous situation that can become emergency situation during spring floods, and Urilkiv water reservoir can be overflooded. There is a risk that protection dam can be ruined and populated areas will be flooded. So to purify this river, Urilka River, we need a little bit more than 600,000 euros. And building of water protection dam on Bystrytsa Solotvinska river in Ivano-Frankivsk region is because of the need to prevent emergency situation, in particular if we have flooded water, to implement this project, we need 4,400,000 euros. Actually, that's all I wanted to say. It is in the categories, so even inside the categories, it also has subcategories or projects, so that with all donors we can discuss that and close those issues. I hope for our fruitful cooperation. And actually, State Agency of Water Resources up till now has been working with donors in a very not effective way. That's why I once again would like to express my gratitude for the organization of this roundtable discussion, and it will be a beginning of fruitful cooperation for all of us. Thank you, and I'm ready for your question. If you have any question.
Comments, issues? No. All right, then I think it's a good time to announce coffee break. Yeah. So if you have no questions, please, coffee break.
Well, colleagues, there's a change of face and a change of voice, but let's continue with some of the discussions. I think from a personal point of view, and perhaps as the colleagues put their microphones, let me quickly present myself, some initial reflections, and then pass the word to some of the next speakers. My name is David Alford. I work as the coordinator of the Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Cluster, which is essentially a type of association of humanitarian organizations working in water and sanitation. As a cluster, in line with the theme of this workshop, we've been looking to see how do we reinforce the linkages between humanitarian and development work to make sure that our interventions from the humanitarian side are not only covering the humanitarian needs that have been identified by the different colleagues who spoke earlier, but also making a link to what comes next, the larger investments, the improvement of efficiency, the decrease of losses, the increasing of capacity, the looking at the water balance issues, the consideration of the interlinkage between quality, the availability of the resource and its use for agriculture and other uses. Of course, from the humanitarian side, we're very much focused on the immediate, but there are many possibilities, and we'll see some of those possibilities today. The first speaker will be my colleague, Marion Chambart from the technical cell. And without further ado, let me pass the word.
Thank you, David. Could you please put my presentation? Yeah, how does it work? Yes, okay. I see that the screen is but you cannot read. But this slide was to explain that the technical cell, we are part of the WASH cluster. The WASH cluster is about, let's say, 12 to 15 people working full-time in Ukraine for coordination of the humanitarian response. And the technical cell, I will come into the details about what we do and who we are. We are 4 people, me, from Swiss Cooperation and Unisef, and 3 Ukrainian colleagues, Andrei Nikitin, who is also the Vice President of the Voda-Canal Association of Ukraine, Alexander Kozak, expert in construction and civil engineer, and Olga Gorbatova, our information manager. So that's who we are, but what we do is more interesting. First of all, we collect information about the needs of the water utility in Ukraine. It means that we travel a lot, we meet them a lot, we have direct communication with Voda-Canal director or engineers through Telegram, and also they communicate together on this Telegram group that we have. We organize workshop in each oblast. We go there, introduce ourselves, introduce humanitarian organization, the type of support they can receive, how they can request support, how do we operate as an international organization in the context of a crisis. So first thing is do whatever we can to collect information about the situation, the problems, and how we can, their needs. We analyze this information. That means we put priorities within the huge list of needs, as we've heard already. What will be critical to provide the basic services and what is more looking at sustainability and then long-term development. Once we have established, analyzed information, we share it with all our members of the cluster of our organization, but also we share information to whoever is asking, meaning the authorities, the water utilities, the different associations. And so that's the website we've developed. So it's a map of Ukraine. Each drop represents a water utility. And if you go on each drop, you will find the contact, the list of needs, the priority we've established, and more importantly, the response plan, meaning in the what is provided by which organization with the level of priority, and what is remaining to be filled. So the purpose of it is to avoid duplications of assistance, because if without coordination, it's very likely to occur, and make sure that gaps are not left open for too long. We organize this coordination. Every organization wishing to support water utilities, they inform us and they ask if someone is already doing it. We also coordinate with Voda-Canal, making sure that they are aware of what's coming. We support as much as possible organization in there, whether it's technically or having contact access or any questions they may have. And we also work on the advocacy with the rest of the cluster. Something a bit new for us is to work towards early recovery, and it's something we are starting to implement, is to assess the resilience or the vulnerability of the Voda canals we visit. So what do? We we have a new line of questions when we talk to them, not only what they need to restore water service today, but what they need to keep their services running for a longer time. So we look at their financial situation, we look at their staff, their capacity in general, their maintenance, their tools, their equipment, and we see how sustainable is the humanitarian support that is provided. We also discuss with them we identify weaknesses, key interventions that would help them be able to provide water services for a longer time. And let's come, now that I have introduced who we are, what I wanted to present to you today. It's a conference, a roundtable we organized in December 2023. We invited 30 water utilities representative in Kyiv from 9 oblasts, Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and Mykhailo, so either frontline or deoccupied. Different sizes of water canal, from villages to capital of oblast, and we had together with us about 10 representatives for humanitarian organizations. The objective was to understand what were the remaining short-term needs of these water utilities and evaluate how we could further support them more on the long term, and what were the challenges of working together with the canal and humanitarian organization and what can be improved. So I wanted to present to you the key findings from this discussion. It was organized through a survey. We had a set of questions, and each Voda canal could vote and set their priorities with their phones to have the opinion of everybody in the room at the same time. So the main challenges in service delivery they mentioned was the water quality, the drinking water quality, especially after Kakhovka Dam destruction. And some Voda canal reported that the loss of water quality had an impact on their revenue because people refused to pay technical water at the cost of drinking water, so they refused to pay at all. But for the water utility, the cost was still the same, even higher, so creating a difficult financial situation there. And the second thing was lack of power. So different aspects, a lack of finance to pay the electricity company, and they were all mentioning being under the threat of being disconnected from electricity. And in sometimes to reduce their debt to the electricity company, some introduced water restrictions. So water is provided maybe only during daytime, so they reduce their electricity consumption. They all mentioned their debt toward the electricity company. And one interesting fact is, for instance, in Kherson Oblast, after the occupation, where the water utility didn't collect any income for 9 months, they were asked to pay for the electricity invoice for these 9 months of occupation and put them in an even more difficult situation toward the electricity company. And the last thing, of course, is attack on infrastructure. So they basically all have enough generators to compensate the fact that they are disconnected, but the lack of staff, fuel, or funds to operate the generators that have been donated. Then we discussed maintenance and rehabilitation of networks and infrastructures. So out of the 30 Voda canals we had with us that day, they reported that 2/3 of their water supply system was in operation and half of their sewage system. And when we talked about what were their needs, they first mentioned the lack of special vehicles and especially excavator, and a recurrent need for motor pumps, tanks, and tankers to expedite the repair works. Lack of staff was another issue, especially for these Voda canal close to the front line where conscription is maybe a bit more active. One utility told us that they only had one remaining worker, and they added still have it because he were over 65 years old and not couldn't be mobilized. Access was an issue to keep the service running because of shelling, because of road condition. In some places, it's impossible to have equipment delivered. That's one thing, but it's also very difficult for people to move with a vehicle without being targeted and to get to any center where they could get any material. Or Marganiec-Voda Canal, they told us when they want to implement any work to their water utilities, they have about 15 minutes to operate before being targeted by the Russian forces. So every intervention is at maximum 15 minutes long, which makes the repair works much more long. Legal aspect was something very interesting that was brought to us. They faced many refusals from authorities to legalize boreholes or networks that have been constructed in emergency to restore water supply to the population without taking too much into consideration the issue of licenses and building permits. And once the things are finished and they want to connect them and put them in operation, they cannot due to legal issues. And finally, about 2/3 of the water utility said they can do the works if they receive equipment and material from humanitarian organization. But for the 1/3 remaining, which are probably the more difficult to access, it's also difficult to mobilize contractors to go and work there. Financial sustainability of Voda Canal. We discussed that already today, or we heard about that already today, that the financial situations of the water utility is critical and was already critical before, but now it's getting worse and worse. The invoices are issued, but 50% are paid compared to the 90% before. So I heard the debt of the consumer today. That was the first time I heard that. But when you talk to water utilities, they usually say before the conflict, everybody was paying, and now only half of them. As I said before, the water quality also come back when you ask when people are not paying because they don't want to pay the same price for a service which is deteriorated. But that's not the only issue. Also, with migration and people relocating, these people usually don't pay for the water, but the water utilities still have to provide the service. Generally in Ukraine, for the water utility, all costs have increased. Electricity, of course, but also chemicals, spare parts, delivery of everything. But on the other side, the revenue decreased. So in average, the revenue covers 40% of the cost of the water utility. So what do? The Voda canals to keep operating. They don't pay for electricity. That's what's happening. They keep paying the salaries, even if they have big backlog. They keep paying for the spare parts of the tools they need because otherwise they would not have them. But electricity, they almost pay nothing. But they are under the threat of being disconnected. And we've heard in few places that equipment have been confiscated, but then given back to pay back for the electricity debt. So they receive support from municipality. It's insufficient already for 75% of them, but they are all afraid that the situation will be worse in 2024 because of the increase of the military tax and that the municipality will not be able to support them as they were doing in 2023. So that conclusion is that despite humanitarian assistance that was critical for all the Voda Canal to maintain services, they are not yet saved. It's not because repair has been done that we can guarantee that they will be able to operate in 2024. So how can we support them further? That was basically the purpose of this discussion. First thing, which has nothing to do with the sustainability, but they all mentioned it, is their need of first aid kits and medical training for their staff. Safety of the staff operating and doing repair works, especially close to the front line, is one of the concerns. In the absence of re-evaluation of tariff for water and wastewater, the first thing the Boda Canal needs is financial support. But it's quite clear that it's not something that is going to come from the humanitarian community. So what can be done if you cannot support financially the Boda Canal? There are three aspects that can be looked at. First is to cover the recurrent costs with donations, that is supplying them with what they use every month, chemical consumables per port. Second thing is support repair and rehabilitation work. So this one is for sure happening. The first point was happening at until now, but I see that lots of organizations are now questioning the fact that they should support chemicals and consumables because it's not long-term and it doesn't have a long-term effect. That's why they would like to shift to something more sustainable. But in the meantime, if this is not covered for the next 1 or 2 years, then the long-term investment would come too late. And then third aspect is to support cost reduction initiatives. So what does that mean? The first thing, and it's very important to highlight it, is maybe the water utility are not capable to express clearly what they need to reduce their cost, and they need support with external consultants for network for any optimization. It's a bit unrealistic to expect the water utilities that have reduced staff, more work, and probably not in-house capacity to develop studies themselves, to give to donors to say, that's what I need for the long term to be a modern and cost-effective company. So they need support in design. And then if we look at what can be done, what studies can be done, the reduction of non-revenue water is something of great concern. Repair of leakages, of course, but also metering system in all the networks. And the other aspect is the reduction of the cost of power supply, whether it's with more modern equipment, reduction of leakages, or alternative and decentralized source of power. Last point I wanted to mention today is the VAT. It's very difficult for humanitarian, I think we can say it's impossible for Boda Canal to get Boda Canal support to be VAT exempted. And it's also very difficult for humanitarian organizations to pay for VAT for humanitarian assistance. Consequence of that is that humanitarian organization will ask to the Boda Canal to pay VAT while they pay for everything else. So we had the example during that conference of a 60 million project, and where the Boda Canal was asked to pay 11 million hryvnia. But as you understood, Boda Canals, they have absolutely no money. So in this condition, for them, it's impossible to accept humanitarian assistance if they have to pay for it. So that was a point that have been highlighted. We don't have a solution for that, except for humanitarian organization to pay also for VAT. It's happening much more for projects and implementation of projects than for delivery of goods, but that's an issue that can slow down a bit support in the future. I will not go into this one. Just one point I wanted to mention is that it seems that recently we have seen increased attacks on water infrastructure. As last year, power, energy infrastructure were targeted. There is a trend. I don't know if it means something or not, that water infrastructure have been targeted in Donetsk Oblast with Karlivka filtration station many times in the last week. Mirnograd mine pumping station too. In Kherson, emergency intervention vehicles from the water utility have been attacked by a drone. In Kharkiv, also reported attacks on infrastructures have been mentioned. Nikopol's pumping station, that was a bit earlier in December. So I don't know if it's a trend, but there is definitely something to be done for preparedness, as we did last winter, to make sure that water infrastructure can keep operating without power supply. Now, what do we need to do if the water infrastructure is directly targeted? And that's all for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Any immediate questions? If not, we'll pass the word to our colleague from PIN, Hannah.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to present people in need experience on WASH sector. Maybe you know that this organization already near 10 years provided is an active humanitarian actor who is really very active in the WASH sector. And we are doing different kind of WASH interventions, from the emergency measures like water tracking, like providing bottled water or hygiene kits to the people in need in Ukraine. We work on early recovery measures implementing, and working with the water utility, and a lot of our activities just provided at Rada level, especially in we have a lot of challenges working in rural area, in areas along the front line, providing the access to water, rehabilitating of the existing water resources, and or building new alternative water sources. And based on all this near 10 years experience working in the WASH sector on humanitarian aid, we now within frame of this roundtable, we just wanted to present our view on how we as a humanitarian actor seeing the challenges and what challenges we are facing when we are working at local level to improve the access to safe water and access to safe sanitation in Ukraine. But nobody can read. It seems to. If to talk about the key challenges, what we are just listed for this roundtable, the first of all, we are mentioning the insufficient ownership or takeover of the infrastructure management after the end of the humanitarian project. It means that sometimes after installation of water treatment at Rada levels, we see how often these installations are not operating in a time when the resource is finished and the humanitarian project end. Other things is that from the beginning of intervention, we are not seeing the place of, or planet at least, the niche for sustainable solutions. And from our experience, we have some kind of these pilots or our activities related to improve the efficiency of energy efficiency or water efficiency, or providing the materials which are more sustainable. We know that we are working in the sector which has well-developed and very broad and complicated infrastructure, especially centralized water supply and sanitation. And at the same time, we're doing, we understand that this is all these infrastructures, equipment are old, and this is a huge task, and cost a lot of human, technical, and financial resources to at least to maintain, and much more resources needed for modernization of such infrastructures. Again, we understand that because of war, the number of the users for water utilities sometimes dramatically decreased. And now we have a reduced number of users, and for this infrastructure to maintain this old infrastructure, it is again unrational things. Today already several challenges which we are facing already mentioned, but among them this is lack of decentralized or alternative sources of water, availability of water resources for drinking purposes, but we understand that there are a spectrum of the needs, and water is needed not only for drinking, not for sanitation, but water for hygiene. And we see that there is a huge lack of water available for drinking and for other needs. In the same times, we recognize and we are dealing with the problem of the lack of information, updated information about water quality, and about availability of water, especially availability of groundwaters, as we now working a lot in eastern and south areas and gromadas where there is really the huge problem with sources, groundwater sources, and there is a lack of information about availability. And this is, in this case, this is really very great initiative to have this IT electronic tool on water cadastre, where we as active actors dealing with the water will have the access to real information, actual information on availability of water resources and about the water quality. What else we have to mention? This is lack of water safety planning at all. It means that water safety is not still a priority in the country, but for us as humanitarian actors, this is there are two main priorities: access to water, quantity of water, and access to safe water, safety of water. And as already mentioned, for us, the problem with the tariff on the water supply and sanitation services, this is unclear policy for us, especially again for the small communities, for the small towns, because we understand that only the less endowed or big utility, they have the tariff settings made by the state. But for the local authorities and for the local hromadas, this is for us unclear situation with these tariff settings. Now, talking about the good practices and the recommendation in war sector, which we are already somehow experienced it, and based on our experience, we can recommend it. Among these recommendations or good practices, this is more resource efficient and sustainable solution for water supply and sanitation. When we are talking about the more resource efficient, it means water as a resources, energy as a resources. And there are many small steps and practices which we used in our activity, like we been purchasing pumps that are more modern and energy saving, energy efficient, and more durable. And these pumps we supply or provide together with relevant frequently regulation devices, what improves the energy efficiency at least what we can do now. Other things what already mentioned here that about the using more sustainable materials, and it was already mentioned asbestos. Yes, in our activity we try to purchase plastic pipelines to replace the old one, asbestos or metal pipes. As a good practice, we understand water energy has to be measured. It means that yeah, to build this good balance on water or energy, we have to measuring these resources and how we use them. Improving this resource usage using the measuring at all level. It means at water canal or water utilities, as well at a community level and household. One of the again example of good practices which piloting by PIN, it was again in context of water saving. It was introduction of drip irrigation system for small rural communities. And this is simple things, but it's really water saving initiatives and the solution which can be used in future. The other things, this is involvement and participation of the community, local authority in this humanitarian aid project. And for us, this is like our basis or key principle, involvement from the beginning of intervention till the end, and monitoring the result and progress of our project, involvement of the people in need, local authorities, local communities in all these projects. And this is a part of the task to to improve the ownership on this project by the local communities. And in this case, what the main again factors what we think are important things on which we are working. This is decentralization of water sources and water supply system, developing groundwater sources, building new wells, new boreholes. Capacity building, many times we already talk about this. This is something what we have to do, and this is one of the key direction of our activity, to build the capacity at local level. Due to the lack of, from one side, lack of human resources, who now technical operators who involved before in this water supply and sanitation service providing, and now communities really has a huge lack of such kind of technical staff, and we have to help with capacity building at local level in this case. and promotion awareness raising on the energy water saving issue in general and practical solution at all level, community level and local level, household level. Water quality. Again, this is one of the very important issues. We understand that this is a huge challenge for Ukraine. We already heard about the different agencies and authorities involved in monitoring of water resources and drinking water quality monitoring. And we understand that there is a weak willingness or lack of knowledge of local communities, local authorities to work on this issue on a regular way. And that is why for us, we are doing some independent resources. We collect the data from the local authorities, from the water utilities, and we see what is the huge gaps in laboratory analysis. We understand that laboratory now different agencies, they have this big problem with equipment, with chemicals for testing of water, and with staff or personnel. Water meter. And one more, what I wanted to highlight, this is water safety plans. This is when we are talking about harmonization of Ukraine water legislation and talking about the implementation of the 6th EU directive. One of these water directives, this is Drinking Water Directive and recast. According to this recast, the risk-based approach, proactive management for the water supply and sanitation recognized as the best practices of management in this sector. And in experience of PIN and its partners acted, already exists the experience on the developing of water safety planning for 5 gromadas in Donetsk Oblast in previous years. But unfortunately, this experience still a good pilot without any consequences and without any follow-up activities. We understand why, because this approach didn't recognized by Ukraine as a approach for reforming this sector to improve and to put the stress on the safety of these services. And we really hope that last year all attempts made by the WHO together with Ministry of Health of Ukraine on raising awareness about water safety planning, about the principles and tools existed for this, will be accepted by Ukraine, and Ukraine will work on this issue. At least some experience of humanitarian actors working in wash sector exist, but what we recognize that still awareness raising and advocacy of water safety plan is needed at all levels, including Gramada level. And we understand that capacity building, this is one of the key needs in Ukraine for all stakeholders, not only for water utilities or the inspection or people from the Ministry of Health Protection. And again, for working forward the implementation of water safety planning, it has to be recognized that participation of all stakeholders, including the civil society, is needed. And the key things is that state support of water safety planning implementation in Ukraine. This is what we are looking for. Thank you for your attention. This is for the beginning of the discussion.
Хочу додати декілька коментарів. Мене звати Сергій
If you don't
Саєнко.
mind, I would like to offer a couple of comments. My name is Serhiy Sayenko. I represent the People in Need organization here today. And one of the positive examples for multiple organizations coming together and coordinating is what my colleague spoke of today. This experience that she's shared is what has been accumulated by different organizations, such as our partners Acted and New Way, who are present here today, and this consortium that has been in place for many years in Ukraine, together, working together to address water supply issues, is a brilliant example of how these dialogues and discussions are needed when multiple opportunities and capacities are pooled together. Not necessarily just financing, but in this case, with EU funding, this consortium has been active in Ukraine for several years, but also technical capacity, human capital. This provides for the ability to address serious issues, which is why some of the things that have been highlighted here today, I'm sure other organizations have experienced them, but it is incredibly important that efforts are coordinated so that we together overcome the issues that are on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks to the colleagues from PIN. And I wonder if there are any immediate questions. I think we saw a very good coverage of a multitude of different issues. Maybe we can pass the word then to our colleague Dmytro from the Ukrainian Water Association.
Thank you. All right, I don't have presentation on me, so I'll try to be short as possible. My name is Dmytro Teslya. I'm head of Ukrainian Water Association. This association was created in September of the last year by active Ukrainian citizens who are scientists, professionals in water sphere, and actually people who wants to make changes in the country with one thing in mind. And the main purpose for this association was actually to bring up the voice of civil society of Ukraine to say that we actually need to prioritize water in this country, and that's what we would love to see on the radar of our government and on everyone who's actually helping Ukraine right now, international community donors. So that was the first reason for creation association. We understand that in this country we didn't have perfect situation with water before the war, and with water on every scale, including water as resource, including water as water supply, water treatment, water waste treatment, and things like that. It never been perfect since Soviet Union collapsed, actually, and now war obviously making it critical and definitely worse than it ever been. And things that we facing from guys who just got a report from water canals, guys who work in these communities on every level, like everyone, all of you guys are, I'm sure, involved in this activity, and you see how critical is situation and it close to collapse. So actually, what I would like to bring up on this table that, and that was idea behind this meeting initially initiated, it was to show that government is open, government is want to make changes and want to cooperate, they accessible, and we as civil society organization has access to them. We actually talking to many key donors and many players from international community here in Ukraine. We understand that a lot of challenges and a lot of problems being seen from lack of communication between government that trying to make changes on one hand and humanitarian organizations who's trying to help and actually now already talking about maybe longer term perspective, you know, early recovery possible. So we as association working on a couple projects, and we have a couple projects in mind actually that respond to this request, and we've been active in educational sphere. So we actually have really nice cooperation between MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Rivne Water Resource University. Actually, we just starting like joint student program, and that's more like exchange when students from both countries, from two continents, able to work on decentralized water supply and water treatment in places like Tomakivka or Myrivska Gромada of Dnipropetrovsk region, you know, the areas affected by Kakhovka Dam tragedy. And we're really happy to see interest of international community to all of these questions. And as we discussed with Volodya and David before, actually educational program, it's something that really needed in this country. We already lost a lot of professionals, and as we understand, water is really high quality profession. I mean, it needs a lot of qualified professionals in every sphere, like chemistry, mechanics, and a lot of different things. So this educational program is really weak in Ukraine right now, and that's something we have our interest in. We're also trying to help our country with monitoring of water, and we see water monitoring like in a wider kind of sphere as monitoring of water as resource. So we working on actually implementing a tool that can use satellite readings to calculate water in like sources of water, like lakes, rivers, even underground waters at some point. So we're working in many directions, but here today we want to say that actually we would love to spark conversation between key players in humanitarian response in water here in Ukraine and government. And we thankfully have Mykhailo, so he can participate in this conversation about what can we do better. We do understand that things that been already announced, like Office of Ombudsman, would definitely help. That something that Ministry of Infrastructure doing is obviously very good. And we're glad to see that government has people like Mykhailo, you know, who's 2 months in the office and who's trying to get rid of like possibility to get corruption, implementing electronic systems for, you know, water permissions, water permits. It used to be one of the famous issues with that agency. So they trying to change it, you know, so these people show up there to actually get some results done. So, and that's what I mentioned, and we have access to them. And we hope that this conversation here will bring us to next steps, more conversation, more cooperation between all of us. And that's what I want to offer. We, as association, as the port of Ukrainian civil society, can be a great link between government, between citizens of Ukraine, and between international partners. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, please.
So colleagues, there are no questions for Dmytro. Before we start more general discussions on some of the themes that you have heard, I wonder if Ina could spend just 5 minutes maximum to present something on the development cooperation table.
I was wondering if you can launch my presentation. No, it's fine. Thank you. I will try to be brief because a lot of comments were provided around the humanitarian support, and I just want to emphasize the key elements of our humanitarian response and supports, and to provide you with some updates around the damages and losses. So here in this slide, you can see that since the beginning of the war, there was damaged and destroyed around 8 dams. Maybe it's more than we know now, but now it's 8 proofs damaged and lost dams. The next slide is about physical damages, and these data are from RDNA2. And just to highlight that from RDNA3, we know that the numbers highly increased. So the damages become more and more, and this is really extremely affected not only the people on summers, but also the government. So these slides is about costs as well from RDNA, and you can see the structure of the losses. All these factors affect the that increase of water supply cost. We talked about a lot about the tariff structure, about the importance of changes of tariff policies, and the previous few slides just emphasized that really we need to improve our policies. On this slide, I just want to show that our EU path is required to updating of the policies. We have water directive and we have wastewater directive. And we have the national regulations right now, and all the data we have from the fields, all the data we have from the humanitarian and development things, we need to include to these policies and update it accordingly. As well as sewage treatment. So the losses and updating is required for the urban sewage treatment. That part is about recovery. So I want to bring the linkages between humanitarian response and between recovery, because all the data we can use for the building of sustainable recovery for the Ukraine right now. Due to our cooperation among the humanitarian actors and due to cluster coordination, we have around more than 100 partners in the cluster. Altogether, we even overreach our targets for 2023. Also, the key role and the key coordination part here is allow us to react immediately on each emergencies in Ukraine. And the key message from today from Unicef to all of you that Unicef established a new group with development partners for water and sanitation sector. This group includes the key donors, big players in the sector. All these partners, you can see their logos on the slide. Now in the group, there was only 2 meetings at recent time in the end of 2023 and in the end of the last week. So it just established, we're trying to identify the correct way, how to establish our ideas, how to cooperate and how to gather all our efforts around the development of Ukraine. Sorry. The purpose of this group is policy, advocacy, and data system. We want to inform, program, and to engage the support the government for critical institutional reforms to enable coast recovery, improve water quality, energy efficiency, and climate resilience. We want to integrate technical assistance, including capacity development, and coordinate the recovery projects, but that is really important right now. The linkages with humanitarian is the data and technical assistance which we can really use for the future development project. Humanitarians to provide us with technical assistance to IFI's project and programming, and reforms around the water quality, tariff policy, inform investments and streamline efforts. And here I will wondering if you can discuss this part, ask your questions, maybe bring your ideas, which we can include in our groups, or maybe even furthermore, include you as the participants of these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ina. Any questions, immediate questions? In that case, we pass to an unknown space where we're essentially going to discuss some of the different issues that we've heard about today. We've heard many of the structural points and problems from the different ministries, and many of them match to some of the challenges that you've just heard from the humanitarian point of view. Technical challenges and limitations in terms of technical capacity, but also the ability, not only in terms of technical capacity, but also in terms of the heavy equipment, the ability to have the labs for the water quality monitoring that has been mentioned, the ability to really have a digital way of managing the resource. And perhaps some of the reflections, that was the last point on Ina's slide, what are the other bridges that we can make, could be where we need to focus. I do have some ideas, but before I impose my personal points of view, I wonder if there are anybody who would like to speak up and to share some of their reflections or some of their ideas from what they've heard today. Yep. Yes.
So maybe I can start. So first of all, thank you very much for your presentations and for quite comprehensive overview of the main challenges, issues, but also opportunities that we have within this quite problematic sector indeed. But it is also in a way a sector that has already lots of complementarities, and where we see quite proactive work of the government, of local authorities, and development donors, along with the humanitarian partners. I think that here it is very important what in particular our partner People in Need, but also Unisef mentioned, is this almost 10 years of humanitarian assistance in Ukraine made or created certain ground for very good and comprehensive understanding how the water supply and sewage systems work in Ukraine. So because the system is very complex with lots of problems, so I think that maybe first proposal for the key humanitarian partners active in this sector is to consolidate all the information, all the lessons learned from the previous humanitarian context in the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. Now, for example, aftermath of the Kakhovka Dam crisis, and you work in many conflict affected communities. So just to understand what are the real humanitarian, let's say, type situations we need to focus, because for humanitarian donors as ECHO and others, it would really help, because we need to prioritize. The second very important point you mentioned, and this is, I understand, this is one of the biggest challenges, which is the financial part of the of the function of the water supply companies in Ukraine. So this is something that should be the solution should be found at the highest level, right? So we need to know and understand from the senior management of these water supply companies, from the government, what we should do with these debts, how to find financial resources or more longer term solutions to actually to ensure that that there is no collapse of these systems, because we understand that the situation is critical. And the third point, which is very important, is this is also a sector where we need longer term solutions. So what we did all together over the last almost 2 years with the support of many partners, with local central authorities, is that we ensure that the critical water supply was either not interrupted or very quickly restored. Emergency let's say supplies were provided, but now when we have, let's say, from the humanitarian point of view, a bit more stable situation, of course we are far away from from being in normal situation, but I think this is we are actually reaching a point when we can talk more and more about these linkages with development, with recovery, with longer term solutions. So I find it's very interesting that we have representatives of the government, of the legislative, that share the same vision that we need to work on longer term solutions. Yes, the humanitarians, we work on short term solutions, but this is a sector where with the short term actions we can already launch or prepare the grounds for longer term actions. So yeah, I think that we need to also identify in which format we will continue certain discussions that are and definitely determine the maybe just the most critical points of actions that we need to continue on. Thank you.
Thank you. How to do this? So what I hear is, from ECHO's point of view, a need to focus on what do we need to focus on for humanitarian funding, where we might look to some of the suggestions from the State Agency for Water in terms of some of the suggestions they gave, but also think about, for example, the impacts of Kakov Reservoir, the increased impacts on Karlivka, and the 8 dams that Marion had mentioned. It could be something interesting to look at in terms of purely humanitarian. And of course, there will be continued shifts in the front line, and either direction, a movement in either direction will have implications for humanitarian interventions. I understand also the linkages and the learning that we can make to inform some of the development or the larger investments that come. And then, of course, which topics do we continue to focus on from the humanitarian side? I wonder if there are any immediate reactions. Yes, the colleague from ACTED.
Yes, thank you. Flor Brunswick, Project Development Manager for ACTED. I wanted to come back on the more rural centralized water supply systems that ACTED has been focusing mainly on. And considering that what we've talked about today, more rural populations are either unwilling or unable to pay higher tariffs for potable water for access to more drinkable water from the centralized systems. Should humanitarian actors really focus on building back better water supply systems that were providing only technical water before the invasion? And for a more sustainable approach, can we imagine more joint programming where we would rehabilitate a water supply system that only provides technical water while working at household level on the provision of, for example, household filtering system, if possible, which would allow to cover in kind, for example, filters for a certain amount of time, while trying to find linkages with other type of programmings like livelihood to ensure that this capacity to replace the filters is maintained. We wanted, to raise the conversations on more sustainable solutions that are still humanitarian.
So a need to focus in terms of those sustainable interventions, not only on existing urban systems, but also those rural locations that are depending on point sources, and how we can potentially promote or suggest approaches be they technical or other, in terms of how that might be done in those rural settlements. I think already amongst our humanitarian partners in the WASH cluster, we have multiple different examples, including yourselves from years past in Donetsk and Luhansk. I wonder if there are any reflections from our colleagues from the ministries before we come back to our colleague from IOM. Translation. Got it. Okay. In that case, maybe we'll continue to keep all these points noted so that we don't lose anything. But if we could pass the word to Asif from IOM.
Yes, thank you, David. In reference to the initial discussion and what we had been discussing right now is related to the humanitarian situation in Ukraine. And this may not be only relevant to our donors, ECHO, but to other donors as well. That at times the donor look into very like pure sort of context of humanitarian identification or nature. But the situation here in Ukraine we have is such is that the activities or the interventions may not look like pure humanitarian, but the impact of those interventions, if delayed, may have consequences sort of humanitarian nature. So that we have to look into, because most of the donors have these requirements that the activities needs to be like purely humanitarian. So we have to look from the other angle as well. Then the second point in relation to this particular point is that some of the donors have this requirement, or you can say thing that they have or they do like community-based interventions, while in Ukraine we are all the implementing partners. We have to work with the Volodymyr Association. We have to work with the bigger stakeholders who may be able to work on the centralized water system or the sewerage system. So this particular things also needs to be taken care of. And the last very important point, which Marion also has mentioned in one of our in her last slide as well, that winterization. Often we do discuss the winterization after the mid-year, and especially if we look into the ECHO's funding cycle, that the discussion or the program implementation of the ECHO cycle starts from after mid-year, and the real interventions kickstarts from September or later October, wherein we need to be prepared for the winter before October, because let's say the heating systems are the relevant or the associated factors for the winterization kickstarts almost from mid-November or early November, while all those factors needs to be go through the trial and run process almost like for 2-3 weeks or a 1 month period. So means we have to be prepared before October or say end of September. So this program funding cycle also needs to be looked in by ECHO and by the other actors as well, that in case if they are, and they definitely are interested in the winterization sort of activities, they need to start thinking about all those things. I think like after March or April, and once the partners have their funding or each and everything on their table, they should be able to start their real on-ground interventions by the end of summer, so that all the interventions or all the activities may be well in place before the arrival of the winter. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Asif. You made me think about what advocacy we might need to be doing, both to humanitarian donors and also to development donors. I wonder if there's any reflections from anybody in that sense.
If I may just also comment on 2 points that Asif mentioned. So very interesting is that the first one, it's about the requirements of the humanitarian donors. But what I want to say is not only applicable for the WASH sector. In Ukraine, many development donors are implementing activities that are almost purely humanitarian. So, and this is a rather unique situation. In particular, it was in 2022, in 2023, and it may continue. So we have let's say, very unusual donors that what they do, it's purely humanitarian response. I just wanted to to mention that, or just to give you an example, which you of course know very well, it's the support provided by the European Union through the UCPM, Union Civil Protection Mechanism, when Ukraine received, I don't remember now the exact figure, but in 2022 and 2023, around 500 million euros worth in-kind assistance, which also included lots of equipment, pumps, pipes for that ended in the Vodokal, which is a very unique situation indeed. And then we had also many development projects that were how to say, repurposed for humanitarian response, in particular when it comes to community-based infrastructure. I remember there was this project implemented by UNDP, or it still may be implemented with the funding of the European Union, providing technical equipment, excavators to, to remove the debris that, of course, many of this equipment was used for water canals and water supply systems. The second is about this winterization. Of course, the support to heating systems is in the focus, but indeed, it's one of the priorities or one of the aspects of winterization, because we know that the support to heating systems is very costly, very expensive, and requires sometimes very long preparations. So here we are a bit also on the verge what we can do with the available funding, because supporting the heating system of one urban settlement may be consume almost all the the humanitarian funding we may have for the war sector in total, because the problems are massive. And here I think it's what you mentioned about this humanitarian cycle, right, for winterization. I think it also depends how the needs are, how to say, a bit advocated. So, very often around, let's say, summer, autumn, we are talking about winterization, that we need more and more. So maybe we need to shift this advocacy and outreach from summer or autumn back to spring, just after the winter, In this regard, what would be also very important is, after winter, in spring, so to have lessons learned or some analysis of support to the heating system in particular, what was critical, what was done, because really it helps to understand what are the main priorities and needs. Because if we receive this analysis or advocacy around the summer months, of course, we also need some time to, I believe other donors as well, to internal discussions and planning, etc. It's not so easy, and we need to have well-informed decisions in this regard as well. Thank you. But these are very, very important points that you mentioned.
Yes, please, Sergey from PIN.
Thank you. I would like to continue your opinion concerning that issue regarding advocacy. And today's meeting has already shown us that majority of us face the same problems, the same challenges. And I would like to mention that it is an extremely great opportunity for us to start communicating and searching of solutions from the side of humanitarian organizations and authorities, because we see that it's a complex. Certain issues, for example, 70% of centralized system of water supply cannot just be solved through some kind of humanitarian response. So that's why it should be a continuation of this dialogue from the side of governmental bodies, state ministries, and humanitarian society, donors in particular. So we can offer certain solutions, not only, as it had been mentioned today, lots of just issues, but also some practical developments that can help in solving such problems. That's the first thing. The second thing that we really need, and I see it from my side, support from the state, because certain solutions, for example, searching for new resources, impossible without engagement of the state, because, for example, outdated data, old data concerning resources in water supply, it's just impossible to find on our own. So that's why update of certain information, or we understand that it's a strategic issue, water resources. So, and it's a sensitive issue, as our practice of this year has shown us. So we need this feedback of what we have heard today, and what from the side of the state we have practical steps, what can be offered, because I think that the technical issue of humanitarian organizations can help with solving technical issues, because we have certain resources for that, and we have employees who already have vast experience in Donetsk and Luhansk regions in looking for solutions, not only in highlighting certain problems, but also in how to solve them. And we have already heard certain solutions today, but the dialogue should be continued, and that's a great platform and an opportunity to find a solution to our problems. Thank you.
I wonder if this could be an opportunity for our colleagues again from the state agency and the ministry. If there are specific, how you see the humanitarian actors might be able to support some of the challenges that you yourselves have flagged to us in terms of those capacities that are needed at different levels of the administrative system.
Can you repeat the question, please? Thank you.
Yes, let me simplify my language. Knowing the obstacles that you have already outlined to us earlier, and having heard some of the types of work that is done by humanitarian actors, are there specific things that you see that we could do as a humanitarian community that will be useful to yourselves to overcome some of those obstacles?
Дивіться, як на мене,
You see, in my opinion, actions of humanitarian actors and representatives of society and representatives of state should be coordinated. Coordination can happen in such a way or in some other way, but we cannot say, as for me, right now, we cannot say that the state should be dealing with that, humanitarian organizations should be dealing with this. So it should be a complex work of all of us to achieve particular targets. And I see it only in building cooperation and dialogue, our future implementation of all the actions. Maybe ministry has different opinion on that, but still. Yes, thank you. Thank you for this event, and I do support Mykhailo concerning the fact that we need to be coordinated. There should be coordinated actions. And apart from that, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that all the projects concerning water supply and sanitation require lots of money, and they're very costly. That's why the state is working on engaging technical international support of all possible countries, partners, donors. That's why I also support the fact that community and all organizations should be working together with us on engagement of these funds to implement the projects.
Трошки додати до запитання.
Mykhailo,
Конкретно
just dwelling a little bit on the question, specifically, what do you think are the kinds of activities, picking out of the list that you mentioned earlier, that there are issues, that you need help, what are some specific things that could be done to help your agency and fall in the remit of humanitarian agencies working on the ground? You mentioned that there's limited resources. We all know where potentially water is available, where there's groundwaters, where there's the aquifer, where it is exhausted. Perhaps when it comes to laboratories, you know, we have experienced this issue of where you've taken a sample and it needs to be taken to Kyiv. What are some quick fixes that could help the agency and also fall into what the humanitarian community can do for you? Look, out of some of the things that can be done quickly is what relates to providing equipment to laboratories. Now you don't need to take samples to Kyiv. We have modern equipment in Frankivsk, Vyshgorod, Odessa, and Slovyansk. That's how they're broken down by regions. But still, those labs still need equipment that they're lacking to be able to provide the entire spectrum of possible studies and examinations. That's the first. And the second is the IT issue. We have a cadastre that needs to be supported with equipment, with hardware. And there you need software. There's a system that needs to be generated and that needs to be populated with data. These are some priorities, and these are things that can be done quickly. I'm not going to look into the more global things and the more long-term issues. I think these two things are easy to tackle by international donors, and they can produce results very quickly. If you don't mind, I have another question. Perhaps there's a region, an oblast, that is lacking resources and that needs to be supported specifically with lab analysis of water quality? No, look, the situation is as follows. The labs, some regions have labs, some don't. They are distributed region-wise. So opening additional laboratories is not something that's on the agenda right now. Rather, I would make sure that the existing laboratories have all the equipment to perform the entire spectrum of analyses, right? So let's make sure that we're not creating unnecessary new laboratories, but the existing ones are well equipped. One more thing I want to add regarding the monitoring. There are certain regions, well, we are limited in our ability to access regions where active warfare is ongoing. They have a network of monitoring sites that used to be in operation, but unfortunately, they are not working anymore, and the continuity of monitoring has broken down. So I would suggest, I've heard you mentioned that there's an option for using GIS systems to perform this sort of monitoring. That would be something that we're interested in. Quick question. How can the laboratory in Slavyansk be used? How can it be accessed if we want water tested? I'm pretty sure that their contacts are easily available from like a website on the internet, but if you need contacts, we can get you in touch easily. And I'm afraid the microphone is off. Terribly sorry. Yes, so this laboratory that has just been referred to by Mykhailo, they have their own website. It is under the Siversky Donetsk regional authority. Their contracts are available. They operate between Monday and Saturday, so they're publicly available, and you can take your samples to them. If there's a need in any of the regions to send water for testing, in certain regions there are smaller laboratories. They are almost represented in every single oblast where there's a regional office or a basin office. They receive the water if it's properly packaged. and they will then refer it for testing to another accredited laboratory elsewhere. So Dmytro, just as a conclusion, if you need help getting in touch with the laboratory, reach out to me. I can make sure that the contacts are there, and you can share them between your other humanitarian organizations as well. Great. I think the issue is more related to which frontline areas have the most urgent need in equipment and in monitoring, because the main focus of humanitarian organizations at the moment is around what we call the crescent area, the frontline areas. So I think a clear understanding of the most urgent issues there would aid us in better quality planning, also for IT equipment. So I get it that there are needs everywhere, but as an example, perhaps Mykolaiv or Slovyansk, where the security situation is quite encumbered, these needs might be more urgent and acute there, right? Look, when it comes to laboratories, we have the needs disaggregated by laboratory. So we can share the whole list with you right now, right here.
This is a fascinating conversation because we have so many different areas, and we have about 5 minutes left for any discussion. Could I go out on a limb and try to make a very brief summary and suggestion of some of the areas where we need to continue to drill into and hear your thoughts? One area that I think might sum up several different points is related to the specific risk areas where we are working, where the state agency has identified specific risks. What can we collectively do to dig into those specific areas and see what can be supported from humanitarian actors, which also speaks to the concern of the humanitarian actor in the room to make sure that we continue to focus humanitarian funding on humanitarian interventions. So there's that element of risk and what can we collectively do to make an impact in that sense. I think beyond that, there are various different themes where we have examples from where we've worked that indeed we need to document in such a way that it can be a resource both for our colleagues from the authorities, but also for our development donors. And I think in relation to that, there is a piece of work that we collectively might need to undertake in terms of advocacy for what can we cover with humanitarian funding. We've heard today a need for specialized equipment. We've heard today the need for water safety plans to be able to give a direction. We've also heard the need to focus on those areas that are being perhaps neglected in the sense of those rural communities with non-centralized systems and how to be able to address those. I suspect that if we're able to cover to some degree those three separate areas, we will be in a much stronger place to also advise the development actors. And I think perhaps one thing that is slipping through is the different timeframes and the different thoroughness that accompanies different types of funding streams. With humanitarian funding, we're able to be a little bit more flexible. With development projects, quite often it's a much more cumbersome process. For example, those elements of the district heating, we're very aware that to rebuild a heating station, it's a process of a minimum of 1 year from start to finish, and humanitarian funding doesn't quite match that. So risk areas, key topics, packaging things to be able to inform those development actors in the larger interventions. I wonder if there are any other reflections or gut reactions that could complement that. And of course, I think when we go through our notes, we're going to find that there are many other different points that we could pull out to work on. Would that sound like a fair summary of priority areas where we would need to look?
Sounds fair. And another maybe like simplifying question is to keep up this conversation. How do we do it? Maybe we need to design some kind of working group, communication chain, line, anything, you know, just not to stop on this meeting, you know. And yeah.
May I, David? I think this channel is already exist. Actually, it's WASH cluster. The main goal of which is gather all us together, discuss the needs, but at the same time, the separate topic can be that part of communication with governmental counterparts. As of now, I see that we are, as a humanitarian, still need to explain our governmental counterparts the main purpose of humanitarian support. And then separately, we need to discuss the development topic. Because life-saving needs is still top priority for Ukraine. But at the same time, the biggest part of Ukraine are safe, and this part is required for development project with also huge needs to avoid the collapse of the sanitation and water supply sector. It's very important. So I propose to all of us to advocate at the one voice that humanitarian still is important. It's a top priority for today. But development can also be a part of this discussion and conversation because of EU accession, because of lessons learned from the humanitarian experience since the 2014. It's almost 10 years, then we have this humanitarian crisis, and we have knowledge how to transfer, how to shift emergency into development, early recovery, whatever. So my view on this situation is to use the existing channels for communication. Might be WASH cluster, might be like these kind of round tables where we can discuss the specific things or can develop the policy brief for advocating, but let's use the something existing, avoiding creation of something new. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. So yeah, it's indeed we don't need to create any parallel system because we have WASH cluster which is fully functional, and we see that the activities are well coordinated. So it's indeed in line with what you just mentioned, is to involve representatives of the ministries of different agencies into, let's say, specific topics of discussion, because everything's interlinked. So in other words, the WASH cluster cannot be very humanitarian. It should already, you know, combine different outreaching, because the complexity of issues within the WASH cluster is maybe only 15% humanitarian, and you know, 85% you know, this old not solved and put aside problems that existed for decades here.
Yeah, I agree. And to diversify these stuff between, you know, humanitarian response, Unisef was established at our development coordination group. This group includes really big shots, big investors. So we can support our utilities. We can support our government with knowledge how to attract the big money, how to attract investments, because we cannot live forever with humanitarian money. We need to think in strategically and know how to bring this money to the country and how to establish KPIs, how to understand the like way of thinking of the big donors, and that should help us to avoid that collapse in the system.
Maybe we can be slightly diplomatic and suggest that there are a variety of different technical themes that can be discussed in the cluster with the different members. But there's something specific here in this forum that continued support from ECHO will be useful. When we're talking about advocacy to humanitarian donors as much as to development donors or the authorities, I think it will be very useful for us as a sector to have the support of ECHO or the EU delegation in being able to, on the one hand, support our partners to document some of those experiences, but also to organize the fora where we can collectively exchange approaches, thoughts, and ideas. And in that sense, I do believe that within the cluster, again, focusing in on those risk areas, perhaps in the same way that we did for Mykhailo with humanitarian development and authorities together, but looking at some of the specific risk areas, for example, today, Kyiv or along Donetsk, and the distribution line up from Karlivka and other areas, but then also key topics where we as humanitarian actors are running into blockages or limitations from our humanitarian donors, so that we can develop some strategies for advocacy, but also finding those linkages and those synergies that we're looking for between humanitarian and development. And then trying to formalize some of those linkages. Because I think there are many development actors that are coming in, as you had said, with humanitarian projects or activities, but are not benefiting from the experience of the humanitarian actors. And we have many humanitarian actors who've worked in areas that have developed possibilities, projects, technical solutions that are not able to attract that institutional funding for continued support. And so I think those three areas, at least in my mind, are the key areas we could focus on in the cluster. But before we close and before that becomes what stays in my mind, I do wonder if there are any other ideas of what we can do within the cluster. Okay. In that case, maybe let me pass you back the word, Dmytro.
Thank you. That was a great meeting. Another simple question: when do we meet next time? That we will think about it. What to have logical, have these meetings, and hopefully you all have contact information from representative of the government. They're looking for cooperation and they're looking for your participation in what they're doing. And hopefully government got some of their answers and questions. Look forward to our next meeting. I hope and I think it will be more officially organized by government next time, hopefully. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you from Ukrainian Water Association for getting together today.
Thank you very much for coming, and I think it's a really great opportunity to talk about these complex issues because again it gives better understanding of the key priorities. So the challenges are massive. We cannot solve all of them in one shot, but little by little we can find the links that are the most important to maintain or to reestablish. And then we will of course work into this direction. And again, we are always open for any suggestions, any proposals. Okay, there will be proposals coming soon, of course, at least for ECHO. But it gives a good understanding what we should look at, and if necessary, of course, what kind of questions or feedback we need to receive from you to also make our funding strategies more efficient and comprehensive. So thank you very much for coming. We just perfect in terms of time. This is already a very good start. Thank you.